The one thing about being the IT guy is that everyone assumes you're too boring to notice the important stuff. They figure you're buried in spreadsheets and server maintenance, completely oblivious to the real world spinning around you. That assumption has served me well over the years, especially when people started treating me like furniture in my own marriage. My name is Orion Vanton, and I've been married to Selah for 16 years. We have a 15-year-old son named Jamie, who's smarter than both of us combined, though lately he's been giving his mother the kind of looks that suggest he's figured out more than she realizes. Christmas Eve afternoon, I decided to surprise everyone by arriving at Selah's parents' house 2 hours early. I'd wrapped up my project deployment ahead of schedule and thought it might be nice to help with dinner preparations. Maybe even spend some quality time with my wife, who'd been increasingly distant over the past few months. The Caldwell house sits on 2 acres in the most pretentious neighborhood in town, complete with circular driveway and columns that serve no architectural purpose except to announce that Howard and Miriam have money. I parked behind Selah's Honda and grabbed the gift bags from my trunk, already rehearsing my cheerful surprise entrance. The front door was unlocked, as usual. The Caldwells lived in that bubble of suburban safety where the biggest crime was someone forgetting to return a borrowed lawnmower. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen, so I set the gifts down quietly in the hallway and headed toward the sound. That's when I heard my wife's voice, clear as crystal, drifting through the partially closed kitchen door. "I'm pregnant by my boss. It's the 3rd week, and he'll be a father soon." I froze completely. Not just my body, but my entire thought process seemed to shut down for about 10 seconds. Then my brain kicked back into gear with the cold precision that made me good at my job. I pulled out my phone, activated the recording app, and held it near the door crack. The conversation continued, and I captured every word. "Oh, honey," came Miriam's voice, dripping with the kind of fake sympathy she usually reserved for discussing the neighbor's financial troubles. "Are you absolutely certain it's Gavin's?" "Mother, please. Of course I'm certain. Orion and I haven't been intimate in months, and the timing matches perfectly with that conference in Denver where Gavin and I stayed an extra night." My finger remained steady on the record button, even though my hand wanted to shake. Professional habits run deep. "What are you going to do about Orion?" This was Tessa's voice. Tessa had been Selah's best friend since college, the kind of woman who treated other people's marriages like entertainment. "I'll figure that out. Gavin's already talking about leaving Caroline. He says he's ready to start fresh with someone who actually appreciates him." "Unlike his frigid wife?" Tessa added with a laugh that sounded like fingernails on glass. "Exactly. Caroline's been holding him back for years. She doesn't understand his ambitions the way I do." I checked the recording timer. 4 minutes and 37 seconds of crystal clear audio, complete with timestamp. More than enough for my purposes. "The important thing," Selah continued, "is that I handle this transition smoothly. I've already started documenting Orion's emotional distance. If things get complicated legally, I want to be prepared." "Smart girl," Howard's voice chimed in. "Always think 3 steps ahead in these situations." I'd heard enough. I backed away from the door, collected my gift bags, and walked out of the house as quietly as I'd entered. My hands were steady, my breathing was controlled, and my mind was already working through the next steps with the methodical approach I use for complex system implementations. The drive home gave me time to think. 16 years of marriage, and my wife was planning her exit strategy like a corporate restructuring. She'd already started building her case against me, probably with her parents' full support and legal advice. But Selah had made one crucial error in her planning. She'd underestimated the boring IT guy who noticed everything and documented it all. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my home office, surrounded by 3 monitors and a level of focused determination I usually reserved for critical server failures. The difference was that this time, the system I was debugging was my own life. First step, secure the evidence. I uploaded the audio recording to 3 different cloud storage accounts, created encrypted backups on 2 external drives, and sent copies to my personal email with delayed delivery dates extending 6 months into the future. If Selah wanted to play strategic games, she'd discover that her boring husband had learned a few tricks during his 20-year career in information technology. Second step, verify the timeline. I logged into our joint insurance account and requested all recent medical claims and appointments. Selah had been to Dr. Morrison's office twice in the past month, with the most recent visit coded for routine consultation. Nothing about pregnancy yet, but I made note of the dates. Third step, establish my own timeline. I pulled up my work travel calendar and cross-referenced it with my credit card statements. October 15th through 18th, Chicago client site. November 2nd through 5th, Atlanta system upgrade. November 20th through 22nd, Boston emergency deployment. The Denver conference Selah mentioned had taken place November 8th through 10th. According to my records, I'd been home that entire week, working on the Morrison Hospital Network upgrade from my home office. Interesting discrepancy. Fourth step, research the players. Gavin Sproul, Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian Financial Services, where Selah worked as HR Director. Married to Caroline Sproul for 14 years, 2 children, ages 10 and 12. Drove a black Range Rover with vanity plates reading numbers. The kind of man who wore expensive suits to hide a soft physique and thought his job title made him irresistible. I found his LinkedIn profile, his Facebook page, and his corporate bio. Standard issue middle management type who probably peaked in high school and spent his 40s trying to recapture that feeling of being important. Caroline Sproul maintained a more private online presence, but her photography business website showed a woman with intelligent eyes and genuine smile. Her client testimonials suggested someone who actually cared about her work, unlike her husband who seemed to coast on corporate buzzwords and networking events. Jamie knocked on my office door around midnight. "Dad, you've been in here for hours. Everything okay?" I minimized my browser windows and turned to face my son. He had Selah's dark hair but my analytical eyes, and right now those eyes were studying me with uncomfortable perception. "Just catching up on some work stuff, buddy. You know how it is during the holidays." "Mom called. She's staying at Grandma's tonight. Said you never showed up for dinner?" "Change of plans? We'll do our own celebration tomorrow?" Jamie nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't buying my casual tone. "Dad, are you and Mom having problems?" The direct question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on gathering evidence that I hadn't considered how this situation might be affecting Jamie. He was 15, not 5. He'd probably noticed the tension, the separate bedrooms, the careful politeness that had replaced actual conversation. "Why do you ask?" "She's been different lately, secretive, and you've been, I don't know, like you're waiting for something to happen." Smart kid. Too smart for his own good, maybe. "Sometimes adults go through complicated periods, Jamie. But whatever happens between your mother and me, it won't change how we feel about you. That's a promise." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. But Dad, if something is going on, I'd rather know the truth than be protected from it." After he went to bed, I returned to my investigation. I created a timeline spreadsheet with 3 columns: Selah's activities, my activities, and documented evidence. The picture that emerged was both clearer and more damaging than I'd expected. Selah's late nights at the office corresponded exactly with Gavin's travel schedule. Her girls' weekend in October had coincided with a Meridian financial retreat in the mountains. Her sudden interest in fitness and new clothes had started right around the time Gavin joined the company 6 months ago. But the most interesting discovery came when I cross-referenced our joint credit card statements with her claimed activities. The Denver conference she'd mentioned to her mother, no charges for flights, hotels, or meals during those dates. But there were charges for a local hotel downtown, dinner at an expensive restaurant, and a jewelry store purchase I'd never seen. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was creating an elaborate fiction to cover her tracks, complete with fake business trips and manufactured timelines. The pregnancy claim introduced another variable. If she was actually 3 weeks along, as she'd told her mother, the conception date would fall during a period when I'd been traveling for work. Convenient timing that would support her narrative about our emotional distance. But if she was lying about the timeline, or if the pregnancy itself was fabricated, then her entire strategy would collapse under scrutiny. I needed more information, and I knew exactly how to get it. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house and a text message from Selah. "Spending the day with family. See you tonight for our Christmas celebration." Perfect. That gave me exactly what I needed: time and privacy to execute the next phase of my investigation. I called our insurance company's customer service line and navigated through their automated system with the patience of someone who'd spent decades dealing with corporate bureaucracy. When I finally reached a human representative, I had my story ready. "Hi, this is Orion Vanton, policy number 447-892-1156. My wife mentioned she might need to add pregnancy coverage to our plan, and I wanted to verify our current benefits and any recent claims." "Let me pull up your account, Mr. Vanton. I see you have comprehensive coverage with maternity benefits already included. Has your wife submitted any recent claims related to pregnancy?" "That's what I'm trying to confirm. She mentioned seeing Dr. Morrison's office, but I want to make sure everything's being processed correctly." I showed 2 visits to Morrison Family Practice in the past month, but neither was coded for pregnancy-related services. The most recent visit on December 20th was coded as a routine consultation. December 20th. 3 days ago, after the timeline she'd given her mother. Would pregnancy testing be included in a routine consultation? It could be, but typically we'd see specific diagnostic codes if pregnancy was confirmed. Would you like me to request detailed coding information from the provider's office? That would be helpful. Can you also confirm what documentation would be required if we needed to add a dependent to our coverage? For a newborn, we'd need a birth certificate and confirmation of the birth date for coverage calculations. The effective date would be retroactive to the actual birth date, not the estimated due date. I thanked the representative and hung up, adding this new information to my growing file. Selah's insurance claims didn't support her pregnancy timeline, but that didn't necessarily mean she was lying. It could mean she was being careful about creating a paper trail. My phone buzzed with a text from Lex, my closest friend at work. How's your holiday going? Surviving the in-laws? Lex Morrison was a systems analyst with a talent for finding information that other people preferred to keep private. We'd worked together for 8 years, and I trusted his discretion completely. I called him back. Actually, I could use a favor. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to verify information about a pregnancy claim, what would be the most reliable approach? Hypothetically, medical records are protected, but insurance claims create a paper trail that's harder to manipulate. Why is Selah expecting again? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Lex was quiet for a moment. Orion, that doesn't sound like a question a husband should have to ask. No, it doesn't. What do you need? I explained the situation without going into specifics about the affair. Lex listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear him thinking through the technical aspects. Insurance claims have to match medical provider records, he said finally. If there's a discrepancy, it usually means someone's being creative with the truth. But pregnancy is hard to fake for very long. Reality has a way of catching up. What about conception dating? How accurate is that process? Pretty accurate if you have reliable medical data. Ultrasound measurements, hormone levels, that kind of thing. But early in a pregnancy, there's usually a margin of error of a few days either way. Enough margin to shift blame between potential fathers? Another pause. Orion, are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking about accuracy of medical dating procedures. Right. Well, hypothetically speaking, if someone had detailed travel records and credit card statements, they could probably establish a pretty clear timeline of when they were and weren't available for conception purposes. Hypothetically. Exactly. And if that timeline didn't match up with claimed pregnancy dates, it might raise some interesting questions about paternity. After I hung up with Lex, I spent the afternoon organizing my evidence into a comprehensive file. Timeline discrepancies, insurance irregularities, travel records, and the recorded conversation from Christmas Eve. Each piece was individually interesting, but together they painted a picture of systematic deception. Selah came home around 6 o'clock, carrying shopping bags and wearing the bright smile she used when she was trying to manage my mood. Sorry I was gone so long, honey. Mom needed help with some family stuff, and then Tessa and I did a little post-Christmas shopping. She kissed my cheek with the kind of casual affection that felt rehearsed. How was your day? Quiet. Caught up on some work projects. Good. I know you've been stressed about the Morrison hospital contract. Interesting choice of words, considering Dr. Morrison was the physician she'd been visiting. Actually, that project wrapped up smoothly. No complications at all? She nodded absently, already moving toward the kitchen. I picked up some of that wine you like. Thought we could have a nice dinner together, just the two of us. Jamie's staying at Kevin's house tonight. Sounds perfect. During dinner, I watched Selah perform the role of devoted wife with the same attention to detail she brought to her HR presentations. She asked about my work, laughed at my observations about holiday retail crowds, and maintained eye contact with practiced sincerity. Orion, she said as we finished our meal, I've been thinking about us, about our future. Oh? I know things have been distant between us lately. I take responsibility for that. Work has been demanding, and I haven't been as present as I should be. Work can be challenging. Exactly. But I want us to reconnect. Maybe we could plan a trip together, just the two of us. Somewhere romantic, where we can focus on each other. That sounds nice. When were you thinking? Maybe February, after the busy season at work settles down. February. Convenient timing, considering her pregnancy timeline would make travel more complicated by then, assuming she was actually pregnant. I'll check my project schedule, I said. February might work. She reached across the table and took my hand. I love you, Orion. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You're a good man, and I'm lucky to have you. The performance was flawless, right down to the slight catch in her voice that suggested genuine emotion. If I hadn't heard her conversation with her mother, I might have believed it myself. I love you too, Selah. That night, as she slept beside me for the first time in weeks, I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. Selah was positioning herself for whatever revelation was coming, trying to rebuild our connection so that her eventual confession would seem like a moment of honest vulnerability rather than calculated betrayal. But I had advantages she didn't know about: time, information, and the element of surprise. Most importantly, I had the recording. 3 days after our romantic dinner, Selah announced she had a doctor's appointment. Just routine stuff, she said, gathering her purse and keys. Annual checkup, dirt work, you know how it is? Dr. Morrison? Yes, I should be back by lunch. After she left, I called the insurance company again. This time, I had a specific request. I need to understand the claims processing timeline for my wife's recent medical visits. We're planning some family decisions, and I want to make sure I understand our coverage correctly. The representative was helpful and thorough. I can see that Mrs. Vanton has had 3 visits to Morrison Family Practice in the past 6 weeks. The most recent claim was submitted this morning, but it hasn't been processed yet. Would you like me to request expedited processing? That would be great. And can you confirm what type of services typically require expedited processing? Usually diagnostic procedures that might affect ongoing treatment plans. Pregnancy confirmation, for example, or test results that might require immediate follow-up. I see. How long does pregnancy confirmation typically take to process? If the provider submits the claim with proper diagnostic codes, usually 24 to 48 hours. The system flags pregnancy-related claims for priority processing because of the time-sensitive nature of prenatal care. I thanked her and hung up, then settled in to wait. If Selah was actually pregnant, the insurance claim would confirm it within 2 days. If she wasn't, then her entire timeline story was fabricated. Either way, I'd have definitive information. Jamie came home from school that afternoon and found me in the kitchen, reviewing my evidence files. Dad, can I ask you something? Sure. Is Mom having an affair? The direct question hit me like a system crash, sudden, complete, and requiring immediate recovery protocols. What makes you ask that? She's been acting weird for months. New clothes, different perfume, staying late at work all the time, and she's been really nice to you lately, which isn't normal when you guys are actually getting along. I closed my laptop and gave Jamie my full attention. That's pretty observant. I'm not stupid, Dad. I see things. And I heard her on the phone last week talking to someone about handling the situation carefully. She sounded like she was planning something. What else have you noticed? Her phone is always face down now. She used to leave it anywhere, but now she keeps it with her constantly. And she's been asking me weird questions about how I'd feel if our family situation changed. What kind of questions? Like, would I be okay living in 2 different houses? Or how I felt about the idea of having a baby brother or sister. The baby question confirmed what I already suspected. Selah was preparing Jamie for major changes, testing his reactions before she made her big announcement. Jamie, I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, you'll always be our priority. Both of us love you, and that won't change regardless of what other changes might be coming. So, she is having an affair. I'm still figuring out the details. But yes, I think she might be. Jamie nodded like this confirmed something he'd already concluded. Are you going to divorce her? I don't know yet. I'm gathering information before I make any decisions. Good. You should know everything before you decide anything important. Smart kid. Definitely got that from my side of the family. Jamie, I need you to keep this conversation between us for now. Can you do that? Yeah, but Dad, whatever you decide to do, I want to stay with you. The insurance claim came through the next morning. Pregnancy confirmed, gestational age estimated at 4 weeks and 2 days based on hormone levels and physical examination. I cross-referenced this with my travel calendar and found the problem immediately. 4 weeks and 2 days ago, I'd been in Boston for 3 days, dealing with an emergency server migration that had required round-the-clock attention. I had hotel receipts, meal charges, and even a speeding ticket from the drive to the airport to prove my location. But more importantly, I had detailed logs of my work during that period, including video conference calls with timestamps that placed me definitively in Boston during the entire conception window. Selah's pregnancy was real, but I definitely wasn't the father. I printed out the insurance claim, highlighted the relevant dates, and added it to my growing evidence file. Then I did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I called a lawyer. Jennifer Walsh had handled my business contract reviews for the past 5 years. She was sharp, thorough, and had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests with surgical precision. Orion, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need advice about a family situation, confidentially. Of course. What's going on? I gave her the basic facts without going into emotional details. Suspected affair, confirmed pregnancy with timeline that excluded my paternity, evidence of planning and deception. How solid is your evidence? Recorded confession, medical records, travel documentation, financial records. Everything is documented and verifiable. Good. That's unusual, actually. Most people in your situation operate on suspicion and emotion. You've approached this like a research project. It's how I solve problems. Well, it's going to serve you well here. With evidence like that, you have significant leverage in any legal proceedings. The question is, what do you want to accomplish? I want the truth to come out on my terms, not hers. Meaning? She's been planning this revelation, probably building up to some tearful confession where she takes responsibility and asks for forgiveness. I'd rather not give her the chance to control the narrative. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Orion, I have to ask, are you looking for revenge, or are you looking for resolution? What's the difference? Resolution focuses on protecting your interests and moving forward. Revenge focuses on punishment and public humiliation. Both are understandable, but they require different strategies. I want her to face consequences for her choices. Real consequences, not just a guilty conscience and a fresh start with her boyfriend. Then we need to be very careful about how you handle this. The evidence you have could be devastating if it's presented properly, but it could also backfire if you come across as vindictive. What do you recommend? Let her make the first move. When she comes to you with her confession, you'll be prepared to respond with facts instead of emotion. That puts you in control of the conversation and makes her realize that her careful planning was based on incomplete information. She underestimated me, apparently, and that's going to be her biggest mistake. Selah's confession came on New Year's Eve, which struck me as either perfectly dramatic or completely predictable, depending on your perspective. We were sitting in our living room, sharing a bottle of champagne and pretending to watch the countdown coverage from Times Square. Jamie was at a friend's party, so we had the house to ourselves for what Selah probably saw as an intimate, private moment. Orion, she said during a commercial break, there's something I need to tell you. I muted the television and turned to face her, arranging my expression into the kind of attentive concern that suggested I had no idea what was coming. That sounds serious. It is. She took a deep breath, and I could see her mentally reviewing the script she'd probably rehearsed dozens of times. I've made some mistakes, big mistakes, and I need to be honest with you about them. Okay. I've been having an affair. I let the silence stretch for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to suggest shock, but not so long that it seemed like I was calculating my response. With who? Gavin, my boss. It started about 4 months ago, and I know there's no excuse for it. I was feeling disconnected from you, from us, and he was there, and he listened, and... She trailed off, letting me fill in the emotional blanks. I see. There's more. I'm pregnant. Another pause, this one longer. Pregnant. Yes. And Orion, I need you to know that I'm not sure. I mean, the timing is complicated, and I can't be certain who the father is. This was interesting. She was hedging her bets, leaving room for the possibility that I might be the father. Probably her lawyer's advice, or maybe just her instinct for self-preservation. How far along? About 4 weeks. And you think it might not be mine? I don't know. The timing, it could be either of you. I nodded thoughtfully, as if I was processing this information for the first time. This is a lot to take in, Selah. I know, and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But I want to try to work through this. If you're willing, I want to save our marriage. What about Gavin? I ended it. As soon as I realized I was pregnant, I told him it was over. He wasn't happy about it, but I made it clear that my family comes first. Another lie. According to the conversation I'd recorded, Gavin was planning to leave his wife and start fresh with Selah, but I let it slide for now. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course. Take all the time you need. I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. I appreciate that. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the countdown coverage with the sound off. At 11:47 p.m., Selah excused herself to use the bathroom, leaving her phone on the coffee table. I picked it up and scrolled through her recent messages. Most were routine, but there was a text thread with someone listed as G that was more interesting. Did you tell him? Sent 3 hours ago. Yes, he's taking it better than expected. Selah's response, sent 20 minutes ago. Good. We need to be careful until everything is settled. G's reply, sent 15 minutes ago. I know, but I think this is going to work out. Selah, 10 minutes ago. I hope so. Caroline is getting suspicious. G, 5 minutes ago. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and resumed my thoughtful husband pose. When Selah returned, I was staring at the television with the expression of a man wrestling with life-changing decisions. Orion, are you okay? Just thinking. This changes everything, doesn't it? It doesn't have to. We can get through this together. Maybe, but I think I need to understand the full situation before I can make any decisions. The timeline, the paternity question, all of it. What do you mean? I mean I need facts, not just emotions. If we're going to rebuild our marriage, it has to be based on complete honesty. She looked uncomfortable for the first time since the conversation started. What kind of facts? Medical records, paternity testing, a clear timeline of when everything happened. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Orion, I don't think we need to get that clinical about it. I do. I'm an analytical person, Selah. I solve problems by understanding all the variables. This is the biggest problem I've ever had to solve, so I need all the information. But some things are about trust, not data. Trust is what got us into this situation. From now on, I prefer verification. She didn't like that answer, but she couldn't argue with it without seeming unreasonable. Okay, whatever you need to feel confident about moving forward. Good. I'll make some appointments next week. We can start with paternity testing. Don't you think that's a little premature? I mean, we don't even know if we're going to stay together. Actually, that's exactly why we need the testing. If the baby is mine, that changes the entire dynamic. If it's not, then we're talking about a completely different situation. Selah was trapped by her own lie. She'd claimed uncertainty about paternity to leave room for reconciliation, but now that uncertainty was going to expose the truth she'd been trying to hide. All right, she said finally. If that's what you need? It is. At midnight, we shared a champagne toast and a kiss that felt like a business transaction. Selah went to bed believing she'd successfully managed the first phase of her revelation strategy. I stayed up until 3 a.m., organizing my evidence files and planning the next phase of my own strategy. She wanted to control the narrative, but she'd just handed me the perfect opportunity to introduce some inconvenient facts into her carefully constructed story. The paternity test was going to be very educational for both of us. The paternity test results arrived on January 15th, delivered to my office by certified mail. I'd arranged for the testing through a private lab, using my own insurance and contact information to ensure I received the results directly. Not the father. Probability of paternity, 0.000%. I made copies of the report, added it to my evidence file, and called Jennifer Walsh. The results are definitive, I told her. 0 probability that I'm the father. How do you want to handle this? I want to present all the evidence at once. The affair, the pregnancy, the lies about timing, everything. But I want to do it in a way that gives her a chance to tell the truth voluntarily. A trap. A test. If she comes clean when confronted with facts, maybe we can handle this privately. If she doubles down on the lies, then I'll consider more public options. What kind of public options? Her boss is married. His wife deserves to know what's been going on. And Selah's been building her case for divorce based on my supposed emotional unavailability. If that becomes a legal issue, I want the real facts on the record. Understood. When are you planning to confront her? Tonight. Jamie's at a basketball game, so we'll have privacy. Good luck, Orion. Call me tomorrow and let me know how it goes. I spent the afternoon preparing. I organized my evidence into a clear timeline, printed copies of everything, and rehearsed my presentation. This wasn't going to be an emotional confrontation. It was going to be a business meeting where I presented facts and asked for explanations. Selah came home from work in a good mood, chattering about some office reorganization that was going to give her more responsibilities. She seemed to have convinced herself that our New Year's conversation had gone well and that we were moving towards some kind of reconciliation. How was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek with the casual affection she'd been performing since her confession. Productive. I got some test results back that I wanted to discuss with you. Oh? What kind of test results? The paternity test. We should talk about it. Her smile flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. Of course. Let me just change clothes and we can sit down together. She disappeared upstairs for 10 minutes, probably giving herself a pep talk and reviewing her backup strategies. When she came back down, she was wearing the kind of comfortable outfit that suggested intimate conversation and emotional vulnerability. So, she said, settling onto the couch beside me, what did the test show? I handed her the report without commentary. She scanned it quickly, and I watched her face carefully for reactions. Oh, she said quietly. Well, I guess that answers the paternity question. It does. I'm sorry, Orion. I know this must be disappointing. Actually, it's clarifying. It eliminates the uncertainty you mentioned on New Year's Eve. Right, so I guess we know the baby is Gavin's. We do, which brings up some questions about the timeline you gave me. What do you mean? I pulled out my travel calendar and placed it on the coffee table between us. You said you weren't sure about paternity because the timing was close, but according to the medical records, conception occurred during a 3-day window when I was in Boston. She looked at the calendar, and I could see her mind working through the implications. I guess I was confused about the dates. Were you, or were you hoping I wouldn't check? Orion, I was trying to be honest with you about the uncertainty I felt. But there wasn't any uncertainty, was there? You knew exactly when conception occurred, and you knew I wasn't there. Selah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the calendar. You're right, she said finally. I knew. I was hoping we could work through this without getting into all the details. What other details haven't you shared? What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Christmas Eve. Her voice filled the room, clear and confident. I'm pregnant by my boss. It's the 3rd week, and he'll be a father soon. The color drained from her face as she listened to her own words, followed by her mother's voice and Tessa's laughter. You recorded me? I arrived early for Christmas dinner and heard you talking. I thought it was important to document what you actually said in case there were questions later about timeline or intent. You've been planning this. You've been investigating me. I've been gathering facts, just like I told you I would. This is entrapment, Orion. You tricked me into lying to you. I gave you multiple opportunities to tell the truth. On New Year's Eve, you could have said the baby was definitely Gavin's. When I suggested paternity testing, you could have admitted you already knew the results. Even tonight, when I showed you the test results, you could have been honest about the timeline. I was trying to protect your feelings. No, you were trying to protect your options. You wanted to keep me as a backup plan in case things didn't work out with Gavin. She stood up and began pacing, her composed facade finally cracking. So what now? You divorce me and ruin my life out of spite? That depends. On what? On whether you're ready to start telling the truth. All of it. She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. What do you want to know? Everything. How long the affair has been going on. What your plans are with Gavin. What you've been telling people about our marriage. What you've been planning for our future. And if I tell you everything, then we can discuss how to handle this situation like adults. But if you keep lying to me, then I'll assume you're not interested in an amicable resolution. Selah sat back down, and for the first time in months, I saw something that looked like genuine emotion on her face. Not the performed vulnerability she'd been showing me, but actual fear. The affair started in September, she said quietly. Right after Gavin joined the company. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Go on. He was having problems with his wife, and I was feeling disconnected from you. We started talking, and then having lunch together, and then you started sleeping together. Yes? Where? Hotels, mostly. Sometimes his apartment downtown. He has an apartment? Caroline doesn't know about it. He uses it for work, supposedly. What about the Denver conference you mentioned to your mother? There was no conference. We spent the weekend at a resort in the mountains. Using what money? He paid for it. I made notes as she talked, cross-referencing her admissions with the evidence I'd already gathered. Everything she was telling me aligned with the financial records and timeline I'd constructed. What are your plans now? I don't know. Gavin says he wants to leave Caroline, but he's worried about the financial implications, and now, with the baby coming, he's having second thoughts. He's being cautious. About leaving his wife for his pregnant girlfriend. It's complicated. It's really not. He's a middle-aged man who got caught up in an affair, and now he's realizing that real life has consequences. Selah looked at me with something that might have been curiosity. You're taking this very calmly. I'm furious, I said, but anger doesn't solve problems. Information solves problems. So what happens now? I gathered up my evidence files and stood up. Now I decide what to do with all this information. Orion, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. We have 16 years together. That has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts as 16 years of me trusting you while you planned your exit strategy. That's not fair. Fair would have been you asking for a divorce before you started sleeping with your boss. Fair would have been you being honest about the pregnancy from the beginning. Fair would have been you treating me like a partner instead of an obstacle. I headed toward the stairs, then turned back. Selah, I want you to understand something. I don't care about the affair. People fall out of love, people make mistakes, people want different things, but I do care about being lied to, manipulated, and treated like I'm too stupid to figure out what's happening in my own house. So you're going to punish me. I'm going to make sure that whatever happens next is based on truth instead of deception. If that feels like punishment, maybe that tells you something about the choices you've been making. I went upstairs to my office and closed the door. Through the window, I could see Selah sitting in her car in our driveway, talking on her phone, probably calling Gavin or Tessa or her mother, planning her next move in a game where she didn't realize I was already 3 steps ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Game's over. Coming home. Everything okay?" I texted back, "Everything's fine. Your mom and I had a good talk." Which was true, in its way. We'd finally had an honest conversation. Now, it was time to see what she would do with the truth. The next morning, Selah was gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that she needed time to think and would be staying with her parents for a few days. The note was carefully worded, suggesting that our conversation had been overwhelming for both of us and that some space would be helpful for making important decisions. Jamie read the note and looked at me with raised eyebrows. "So, you told her you know about the affair? How did you?" "Dad, I'm 15, not 5, and I heard you guys talking last night. She was pretty upset when she left. Are you okay with this?" "I'm okay with you not pretending anymore. It was getting weird, watching you both act like everything was normal." Smart kid. Definitely got the analytical mind from my side of the family. "What happens now?" he asked. "That depends on what your mother decides to do. But I want you to know that whatever happens, you get to choose where you want to live." "I already told you. I want to stay with you." "Even if it means changing schools or moving to a different house?" "Dad, I've been watching this situation for months. Mom's been planning to leave anyway, at least with you. I know what to expect." I spent the morning organizing my evidence files and preparing for whatever came next. Jennifer Walsh had advised me to let Selah make the first move, but I wanted to be ready for any scenario. Around noon, my phone rang. Gavin Sproul's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hello, Gavin. We need to talk?" "About what?" "You know what. Selah told me about your conversation last night." "Did she? What exactly did she tell you?" "That you've been spying on her and recording private conversations. That's illegal, you know." "Actually, it's not. Recording conversations in your own home is perfectly legal in this state, but I appreciate your concern about legal issues. Look, Orion, I know this is a difficult situation for everyone involved, but we're all adults here. We should be able to work this out without making it more complicated than it needs to be." "I agree completely. Adults should be able to handle their responsibilities honestly." "Right. So maybe we could meet somewhere and discuss how to move forward in a way that's best for everyone." "Including your wife?" There was a pause. "Caroline doesn't need to be involved in this." "Doesn't she? I mean, if we're talking about adult responsibilities and honest communication, it seems like she should know what's been going on." "Orion, let's be reasonable here." "I am being reasonable. I'm suggesting that all the affected parties should have access to accurate information." "What do you want?" "I want the people who've been lied to understand what's actually been happening, starting with Caroline." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Your wife deserves to know that you've been having an affair, that you got your girlfriend pregnant, and that you've been using company resources to support your relationship." "Company resources?" "Hotel charges on your corporate card, travel expenses for personal trips, use of company property for personal meetings. I'm sure HR would find it interesting." Another pause, longer this time. "How much do you know?" "I know everything, Gavin. Financial records, travel logs, timeline documentation, recorded conversations. I've been very thorough. What do you want from me?" "I want you to take responsibility for your choices. Tell your wife the truth. Handle the pregnancy situation honestly. Stop trying to manipulate the narrative." "And if I don't?" "Then I'll make sure the information gets shared with the appropriate people anyway. Caroline, your HR department, anyone else who needs to understand what's been going on." "That's blackmail." "No, that's accountability. Blackmail would be if I demanded money or favors in exchange for keeping quiet. I'm simply suggesting that you handle your responsibilities like an adult." "I need time to think about this." "You have 24 hours. After that, I start making phone calls." I hung up and immediately called Jennifer Walsh to update her on the conversation. "He's panicking," she said. "That's good. Panicked people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "They might try to pressure Selah into changing her story. They might make threats they can't follow through on. They might even do something stupid like trying to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses. Should I be worried about that? Not really. You've documented everything properly and you haven't done anything illegal. But you should probably expect some pushback from both of them. The pushback came that evening in the form of Selah's parents. Howard and Miriam Caldwell arrived at my house at 7 p.m., dressed like they were attending a business meeting and carrying themselves with the kind of righteous indignation that suggested they'd been rehearsing their presentation. "Orion," Howard said when I opened the door, "we need to discuss this situation with Selah." "Come in. Can I get you something to drink?" "This isn't a social visit," Miriam said, settling into our living room like she was claiming territory. "We're here because our daughter is devastated by your behavior." "My behavior?" "Recording private conversations, hiring investigators, threatening to ruin people's lives. This isn't the man we thought you were." "What man did you think I was?" "Someone who would handle a difficult situation with dignity and discretion," Howard said, "not someone who would turn a private family matter into a public scandal." "A private family matter," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling adultery and pregnancy fraud now?" "Selah made a mistake," Miriam said, "but she's trying to do the right thing now. She's willing to work on the marriage, to rebuild the trust between you." "By continuing to lie about the timeline and paternity?" "She told you the truth last night." "She told me some of the truth after I presented her with evidence that made lying impossible. There's a difference." Howard leaned forward in his chair. "What do you want, Orion? Do you want to destroy your wife's career? Do you want to break up another family? Do you want your son to grow up knowing that his father chose revenge over reconciliation?" "I want honesty. I want accountability. And I want the people who've been affected by this situation to have accurate information." "That's not your decision to make," Miriam said. "Caroline Sproul doesn't need to know about her husband's personal mistakes. That's between them." "Actually, I think that's Caroline's decision to make, just like it was my decision whether I wanted to know about my wife's affair." "This is vindictive," Howard said. "You're using information as a weapon." "I'm using information as information. The fact that it's inconvenient for you doesn't make it vindictive." We went around in circles for another 20 minutes, with the Caldwells alternating between appeals to my better nature and warnings about the consequences of my actions. Throughout the conversation, it became clear that they saw me as the problem, not Selah's choices. Finally, Howard played what he probably thought was his trump card. "If you pursue this course of action, we'll support Selah in a contested divorce. We'll hire the best lawyers, and we'll make sure she gets everything she's entitled to. Including half of everything I've worked for while she was planning her affair. Including appropriate compensation for 16 years of marriage. Based on what grounds? Emotional abandonment, creating a hostile home environment, using private information to harass and intimidate." I almost laughed. "You're going to argue that I created a hostile environment by discovering that my wife was having an affair?" "We're going to argue that your response to a difficult situation has been unreasonable and vindictive." "Good luck with that, especially when the court hears the recording of Selah discussing her pregnancy timeline with you, Miriam." That stopped the conversation cold. Miriam's face went white, and Howard looked like he'd been slapped. "You recorded our private conversation?" "I recorded a conversation that took place in your house while I was delivering Christmas gifts. A conversation where my wife discussed her affair, her pregnancy, and her plans for handling the situation. A conversation where you, Howard, advised her to think 3 steps ahead in preparing for legal complications." They left shortly after that, with significantly less righteous indignation than they'd arrived with. Jamie, who'd been upstairs during the entire visit, came down as soon as their car pulled out of the driveway. "Grandma and Grandpa seemed upset. They're worried about your mother. Are they going to try to cause problems for you?" "They might try, but I don't think they'll succeed." "Good. I never liked how they treated you anyway." "What do you mean?" "Like you weren't good enough for Mom, like you were lucky she married you instead of the other way around." Out of the mouths of teenagers. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Caroline Sproul. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Yes. When and where?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Coffee on Main Street." "I'll be there." The conversation with Caroline was going to change everything. Once Gavin's wife knew the truth, there would be no going back to private family discussions and quiet resolutions. The situation was about to become very public, very quickly. And I was ready for that. Caroline Sproul was not what I'd expected. Based on Gavin's dismissive comments about his frigid wife and Selah's description of a woman who didn't understand his ambitions, I'd pictured someone defeated and disconnected. Instead, the woman who stood up to greet me at Riverside Coffee was sharp-eyed, well-dressed, and radiated the kind of controlled energy that suggested she was very much in command of her own life. "Orion, thank you for meeting with me." "Of course, though I have to admit I'm curious how you got my number." "I have my methods." She smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. "I also have some questions about my husband's recent activities." We settled into a corner booth with our coffee, and Caroline got straight to business. "How long have you known about the affair?" "Definitively? About 3 weeks. Suspected? Several months. And you have evidence?" "Extensive evidence." "Good. So do I." She pulled out a tablet and showed me a spreadsheet that made my own investigation look amateur by comparison. Credit card transactions, hotel reservations, restaurant charges, phone records, travel logs, and even GPS data from Gavin's car. "You've been busy," I said. "I've been suspicious for months. Gavin thinks he's clever, but he's actually quite predictable. Late nights at the office that don't correspond with any actual work projects. Business trips that don't appear on his company calendar. Expenses that don't match his stated activities." "When did you figure out it was Selah?" 2 weeks ago. I followed him to that downtown apartment he thinks I don't know about. Selah was there." "You saw them together?" "I saw her leaving the building at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. It wasn't difficult to connect the dots." Caroline scrolled through more data on her tablet. What I didn't know was the extent of their relationship. The pregnancy, for example. That's new information. "How did you find out about that?" "Gavin came home last night in a panic. Started talking about complications and unexpected developments. When I pressed him for details, he eventually admitted that his girlfriend was pregnant." "What was his reaction?" Terror. Pure terror. He kept talking about how this was going to ruin everything, how he needed time to figure out how to handle the situation." "And your reaction?" Caroline's smile turned genuinely amused. "Relief, actually. I've been planning to divorce Gavin for 6 months, but I wanted to make sure I had enough evidence to protect my interests and my children's interests. This pregnancy gives me everything I need." "You were already planning to leave him?" "Orion, I've been married to Gavin for 14 years. I know exactly who he is. This affair isn't his first, it's just his most serious. And frankly, I'm tired of pretending I don't notice." "Why didn't you confront him earlier?" "Because I wanted to be prepared. Gavin has access to significant financial resources through his job, and he's not above using them to protect himself. I needed documentation that would hold up in court and prevent him from hiding assets or manipulating the narrative." "And now you have that?" "Now I have everything. Financial records, evidence of adultery, proof that he's been using company resources for personal purposes, and documentation of his poor judgment regarding workplace relationships." Caroline closed her tablet and looked at me directly. "The question is, what do you want to do with your evidence?" "I want Selah to face consequences for her choices. Real consequences, not just a guilty conscience." "What kind of consequences?" "Professional consequences, social consequences, legal consequences if she tries to manipulate the divorce proceedings. And Gavin gets whatever he deserves based on his choices." Caroline nodded approvingly. "I like your approach. Very systematic." "I'm good at systems." "So I've heard. Gavin mentioned that you work in IT. He seemed to think that made you less observant about interpersonal dynamics." "Gavin underestimated me." "Gavin underestimates everyone. It's one of his most consistent character flaws." We spent the next hour comparing evidence and coordinating our strategies. Caroline's investigation had uncovered details I'd missed, while my timeline analysis filled in gaps in her financial data. "There's something else you should know," Caroline said as we prepared to leave. "Gavin's been telling people at work that your marriage has been troubled for months. He's been positioning himself as a supportive colleague helping Selah through a difficult time." "Building his defense narrative." "Exactly. If this becomes public, he'll claim that he was just being a friend to someone whose husband was emotionally unavailable. That's going to be hard to maintain when people hear the recording of Selah discussing the pregnancy timeline." "You have audio?" I played her the Christmas Eve recording. Caroline listened with the kind of focused attention I recognized from my own evidence review sessions. "This is devastating," she said when it finished, "especially the part where she talks about Gavin being ready to be a father. That contradicts everything he told me last night about being surprised by the pregnancy." "People lie when they're cornered." "Yes, they do, which is why I think we should coordinate our revelations." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we should make sure that when this information becomes public, it all comes out at once. No opportunity for damage control or revised narratives." "You want to go public?" "I want to go comprehensive. Selah's workplace, Gavin's workplace, your social circles, their social circles. Everyone gets the same information at the same time. That's aggressive. That's thorough. Half measures just give people time to spin new stories and find new ways to avoid accountability. I thought about Jennifer Walsh's advice to focus on resolution rather than revenge. But looking at Caroline's evidence files and thinking about Selah's careful manipulation of our entire marriage, resolution was starting to feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. What did you have in mind? Caroline smiled, and this time it was definitely not friendly. I'm thinking we need to have a conversation with HR at Meridian Financial Services, and maybe with some mutual friends, and possibly with some local media contacts I know through my photography business. Media? Nothing sensational, just some social media posts that happen to get shared widely. The kind of thing that makes people aware of the situation without us having to actively spread gossip. You've thought this through. I've had months to think this through. You just gave me the final piece I needed to make it work. We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again in 2 days to finalize our plan. As I drove home, I realized that my quiet, systematic approach to gathering evidence had just evolved into something much more comprehensive. Caroline Sproul was not a woman who did anything halfway, and she was very, very angry at her husband. Gavin and Selah were about to discover that they'd underestimated both of their spouses. That evening, Jamie asked me how the meeting with Caroline had gone. Productively, I said. Is she going to help you? We're going to help each other. Good. Mom and her boyfriend deserve whatever they get. Jamie, I want you to understand that this might get complicated over the next few weeks. There might be some public attention, some gossip, some uncomfortable situations. Dad, I'm 15. I can handle gossip. Besides, it's not like people don't already know something weird is going on. What do you mean? Kevin's mom saw Mom and some guy at a restaurant downtown last month. She asked me about it, but I just said I didn't know anything. But people notice stuff. Are you okay with this becoming more public? I'm okay with people knowing the truth instead of whatever story Mom's been telling. Smart kid. And apparently, he'd inherited more than just analytical skills from my side of the family. He'd also inherited a strong sense of justice, which was good, because justice was exactly what we were about to deliver. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in my office reviewing the final divorce paperwork when Jennifer Walsh called with an update. Selah's lawyer wants to discuss a settlement, she said. What kind of settlement? The kind where she gets significantly less than she was originally demanding. It seems that having her affair documented in multiple formats has affected her negotiating position. And Gavin. Caroline's divorce is proceeding smoothly. Gavin's been terminated from Meridian Financial for violating company policies regarding workplace relationships and misuse of corporate resources. He's also facing some interesting questions from the IRS about unreported income and questionable business expenses. Caroline's been thorough. Caroline's been surgical. I'm actually impressed by her approach. The public revelation had gone exactly as Caroline had planned. A carefully coordinated release of information to HR departments, social media networks, and mutual friends had ensured that everyone heard the same story at the same time. No opportunity for damage control, no chance to spin alternative narratives. Selah had tried to claim that she was the victim of a vindictive husband who'd invaded her privacy and violated her trust. But it's hard to maintain victim status when people can listen to you planning your affair and discussing your pregnancy timeline with clinical precision. Gavin had tried to claim that he was just supporting a colleague through marital difficulties, but his corporate credit card records and the apartment lease in his name made that story difficult to believe. The most satisfying part had been watching them realize that their careful planning had been based on incomplete information. They'd underestimated their spouses, underestimated the evidence trail they were creating, and overestimated their ability to control the narrative. Jamie knocked on my office door. Dad, there's someone here to see you. I looked up to find Caroline Sproul standing in my doorway, holding a bottle of champagne. I thought we should celebrate, she said. My divorce was finalized this morning. Congratulations. How are you feeling? Free, relieved, and significantly wealthier than I expected to be. We opened the champagne and toasted to successful conclusions and new beginnings. Caroline had started dating someone new, a fellow photographer who appreciated her intelligence and shared her interests. Her children were adjusting well to the divorce, apparently relieved to be free from the tension that had characterized their parents' marriage. Any regrets? I asked. About the divorce? None. About the way we handled the revelations? Also none. They made their choices, and they got to live with the consequences. What about Gavin? Gavin's working at a smaller firm for about half his previous salary. He's also paying significant child support and alimony, which limits his ability to maintain the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to. I understand he's had to give up the downtown apartment. And the baby? Due in July. Selah's been trying to get him to marry her, but apparently Gavin's developed some concerns about commitment. Imagine that. Amazing how different people look when you actually have to live with the consequences of your choices. Jamie joined us for dinner, and we spent the evening talking about plans for the future. I'd been offered a promotion that would require relocating to a different city, and Jamie was excited about the possibility of a fresh start somewhere new. "Will you stay in touch with Mom?" he asked. "Of course. She's still your mother, and that relationship is important." "But you're not going to try to be friends with her or anything?" "No. I think we've said everything we need to say to each other." "Good. I don't think she deserves your friendship after what she did." Later that evening, after Caroline had gone home and Jamie had gone to bed, I sat in my office and looked through the evidence files I'd assembled over the past few months. Recordings, financial records, timeline analyses, insurance documents, travel logs, and correspondence. A complete record of how a marriage ended and how two people discovered that their actions had consequences. I'd started this process wanting answers. I'd ended it with justice. Selah had wanted to control the narrative of our divorce, to position herself as a woman who'd made mistakes but was willing to work on rebuilding trust. Instead, she'd become known as someone who'd planned her affair with calculating precision and lied about paternity to manipulate her husband's emotions. Gavin had wanted to have his affair without giving up the security of his marriage and career. Instead, he'd lost his job, his wife, his comfortable lifestyle, and his reputation for professional judgment. They'd both learned that actions have consequences, and that those consequences don't always align with your preferred timeline or narrative. As for me, I'd learned that being underestimated could be an advantage, that systematic investigation beats emotional reaction, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure the truth gets heard by the right people. I closed the evidence files and put them away. I wouldn't need them anymore. Tomorrow, Jamie and I would start planning our move to a new city, a new job, and a new chapter of our lives. A chapter based on honesty, accountability, and the understanding that trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt with good intentions and careful management. Some things, once broken, are meant to stay broken, and sometimes that's exactly the right outcome.